Ben je nog aan het kijken? Ben je nog aan het kijken? Ben je nog aan het kijken? Ben je nog aan het kijken?
Met Xander de Rijke.
My advice to you is seek professional help.
Hallo iedereen en welkom bij Ben je nog aan het kijken? De podcast waar ik, uw host Xander de Rijke, iedere week praat met gasten over hun favoriete televisieprogramma. Als je de vorige aflevering nog niet gehoord hebt, dan heb je gemist dat ik ieder seizoen een paar afleveringen zal hebben waar ik niet zozeer praat met gasten over hun favoriete programma's, maar eerder gasten heb uitgenodigd die effectief hebben meegewerkt aan mijn favoriete programma's. Vandaar dus deze special en de laatste aflevering van het seizoen.
Ben je nog aan het kijken?
Mijn gast vandaag is een Emmy-winnende Amerikaanse schrijver, regisseur en producer die samen met zijn schrijfpartner David Isaacs gewerkt heeft aan onder andere The Jeffersons, MASH, Cheerst, Frasier, The Simpsons, Wings, Bachelor, Just Shoot Me, Dharma and Greg en Everybody Loves Raymond, om er maar een paar te noemen. Momenteel kan je hem volgen op zijn veelgelezen blog en horen op zijn goed beluisterde podcast, waar hij straks meer over vertelt. Onder de indruk en in lichte paniek om hem te kunnen spreken, Ken Levine.
Ben je nog aan het kijken?
Some of my favorite shows growing up would be this goes way back. The Honeymooners, the Phil Silvers Show, which was Sergeant Bilko, the Dick Van Dyke Show was a very big influence for me in the 1960s. And then in the 70s, the Mary Tyler Moore Show was big, and All in the Family, MASH, Maude, Odd Couple. It was a real golden age of comedy in the 70s. Rhoda was also during that era. So those would be the shows I would say growing up, comedy shows that had a big influence on me.
And what was the show that made you want to write for TV? Was it the Dick Van Dyke Show?
Yeah, I think the Dick Van Dyke Show, because I was a teenager, and like most teenage boys, I was in love with Laura Petrie, with Mary Tyler Moore, and it was a real revelation to me that, wait a minute, you could get a hot girl like that, and you didn't have to be a football star. You could be a comedy writer and get a girl like that. Well, hey, I'm funny. I could do that. So that's how that's my basic, first inclination that, this might be a path I might want to take.
Yeah, you did get to work with Mary Tyler Moore later in life.
Yes, I did. My partner, David Isaacs, and I created a series for her, 1985-86, called Mary, that had its problems.
Must have been a surreal experience working with somebody you saw on TV, you idolized, and then you got to write for.
Oh, yeah. It was even more bizarre when, we had her over for dinner, and she'd be sitting in my living room, telling me stories about, working on the Dick Van Dyke Show. And it's like, oh my God, there's Laura Petrie. It's like right in my living room. That was surreal.
And how did you get into writing for TV? I know your mom had something to do with it.
Well, that's part of the story. Yes. I originally, when I got out of college, I decided to be a disc jockey. And I was a top 40 disc jockey bouncing around America, getting fired every 6 months. and I thought, I really want to pursue writing. So at the time, I was in an Army Reserve unit to avoid getting drafted and going to Vietnam. And a new member of the unit was this guy, David Isaacs. And he and I got to talking, and we both sort of had this desire to become TV comedy writers. And when the Army summer camp was over, I went back to San Bernardino, where I was a disc jockey at the time. And then the station changed ownership and we all got fired. And so I came back to Los Angeles to apply for more jobs and live with my parents. And I called David and I said, I have an idea for a TV pilot. Do you want to write it with me? And that's how we started as a partnership. We wrote the pilot. It was terrible. We had no idea what we were doing.
What was it about? Can I ask what it was about?
Yeah, it was about two college students. It was like two roommates in college because we were 23 years old, and that was the sum total of our life experience.
Kind of an odd couple on college, a little bit.
Yeah, and pretty much. And it probably would have cost $20 million in 1973, dollars to produce. But we had a good time doing it, and we had a lot of fun. And then I met a writer who was a successful, productive sitcom writer. And he said, well, the way you break in is you have to write scripts from existing shows. So our favorite show was The Mary Tyler Moore Show. And like I said, neither of us had any training at all. I had to go to a Hollywood bookstore and pick up copies of scripts just to see what they looked like. So David and I, on Saturday nights, when the Mary Tyler Moore Show was on in the States, we would watch the show and I would hold up a microphone to the speaker, which was before VCRs, and we would record the show, and then we would play it back and write an outline, a detailed outline based on the show. We did that week after week after week until we started finally seeing the patterns and started figuring out exactly how they plotted these things. And, like I said, back then you had one chance to see the show. You had to see it live on TV, and it was Saturday night. Fortunately, I didn't have a girlfriend, so there was no problem there. And so we wrote a spec Mary Tyler Moore Show, and we wrote a spec Rhoda. And based on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, we were able to at least get an agent, although it was a, fly-by-night agent. And the show got rejected by the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and it got rejected by Rhoda. And then here's where my mother comes into it. My mom was playing golf one day with a gentleman named Gordon Mitchell, who turned out was the story editor of a brand new show that had just come on CBS at the time called The Jeffersons. And of course, my mom, being a good mom, said, oh, my son is a writer and he's really funny and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure Gordon was thinking, oh, God. So he said, have him contact me. And if he has a script, I'll read it. So I did. I called him up and he was very noncommittal. He said, okay, send me a script. Do you have a script? I said, yeah. He says, send me a script. And if I like it, we'll get back in touch with you. Well, he liked it. And so he called and invited us to pitch story ideas for the Jeffersons. And long story short, they bought one. And that was our first assignment. And once you break in, then you can get like a real agent. And now you're in the Writers Guild. And it just lifts you from that category of wannabes to actual professional writer. Makes all the difference. And so our career was off and running at that point.
Did I read that correctly, that you got kicked off the set of The Jeffersons after that one episode?
Well, we got banned from the show. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay. So here's what happened. First of all, they rewrote practically all of the script. which they told us going in they were going to do. They said if Neil Simon wrote an episode of The Jeffersons, we would probably rewrite everything.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you guys? And of course, we just wanted the assignment and the credit and the money. So for us, we're like, sure, go ahead, rewrite it. We don't give a shit. So they did. They rewrote it extensively. Although I will say as a caveat, when we were up for an assignment on MASH and they wanted to see a writing sample, we sent them our draft of The Jeffersons. And we got the MASH assignment based on our draft of The Jeffersons, not the one that aired. Anyway, they would tape the show twice. They would tape a 5 o'clock show and then an 8 o'clock show. And then they would basically cobble together the best takes of the two performances. So we went to the first taping, and the showrunner, Bernie West, was also the guy doing the warm-up and had a hearing aid. He had a little hearing problem. And through the course of the taping, he's introducing everybody on that stage but us. There's the director, and there's the first director, and there's the editor over there, and there's the cable schlepper and the craft services guy, everyone but the writers. And we thought, well, gee, that must be just an oversight. For the 8 o'clock show, we had our friends, our family, we had our agents, we had stacked the audience with people who were close to us, because for all we knew, this was going to be the only time we would ever have a television show being taped. Same thing now. This warm-up guy is introducing everyone but us. We're sitting in the front row, and my date was sort of a cuter Carla Tortelli.
That's a good reference. Yeah.
All right. So at one point, somebody in our group raises their hand and says, "Who wrote tonight's episode?" And he kind of hems and haws. And my date, like I said, we were sitting in the front row, yells out loud enough for him to hear, because, she's worried about his hearing aid, that he might not hear it. But it was loud enough that the entire audience heard her say, "Hey, they're sitting right here, fucker." So that was the end of our tenure with the Jeffersons.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the biggest shows you wrote on was MASH. Now, for someone like me who lives in Europe and frankly wasn't even born when it ended, I can't imagine how big the show actually was at the time.
Well, here's the thing that's so weird. We were getting 30 million people a week watching that show. But at the time, there were only 3 networks, and 30 million people was certainly a top 5 show. But today, network television shows are lucky if they get 4 or 5 million.
Yeah.
And we just took it for granted that we got that many. Although I will say this, the first episode that David Ogden Stiers was on the show as Charles.
Yeah.
We were there the year that introduced that character. And he was introduced in the opening episode of season 6. And we were all at a first night party at one of the producers' house. And I'm sitting on the couch next to him. And just before the show begins, I said to him, "You realize that in 1 hour, your life will change forever." And he goes, I don't think so. It's a gig. It's a television show. I said, okay. 3 days later, I'm on the set and he comes and finds me and he goes, oh my God, I can't go anywhere. It's like 17 people in the market stopped me. It's like, yeah.
I read somewhere that the finale of MASH was about 70% of all American households. That's an insane number.
It was seen in something like 120 million sets watched it. How many people were at home watching each set? So you figure, okay, if a lot of those shows had parties or families, blah, 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 then maybe 250 million people were watching out of 330 million. So that was pretty good.
Yeah, that's amazing. The
other thing that was so great about it is how, and you just don't have that today. It was such a shared experience, you know, that everybody watched this one television show at the same time.
Yeah.
And you don't have that now. You know, everybody watches shows at their convenience, and even shows that are very popular. There's spoiler alerts.
Yeah.
You know, you can't talk about last night's episode of Game of Thrones because half the audience isn't going to see it until another week or two. So it's all very different and very fragmented now. And I miss that shared experience, that sense of community that everybody was involved. And, you know, I've been very fortunate. I've had that on a number of occasions. I was with Cheers for 9 of 11 seasons. And for the Cheers finale, that only got 84 million people to watch. But I was back in Boston with the cast. We watched it from the Cheers bar. And out across the street in the Boston Common, which was a park area, they set up a giant Jumbotron board to show the program. And there were something like 20,000 people in the park watching the show. So it was bizarre to be watching, sitting in a room watching, and out the window, you're hearing 20,000 people laughing at the jokes. That was a rather amazing experience. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about an episode of MASH called Point of View.
Okay.
It's an entire episode of MASH seen through the eyes of a wounded soldier. Was it ever been done before, an entire episode in first-person view?
No, to my knowledge, it had never been done on television. We had the idea, and we brought it to the executive producer, Burt Metcalf, and we said, this is either going to be the best or worst show of the season. Okay. It's going to be just a big swing at the plate, and you're either going to strike out or home run. There's no scratch single. There's baseball reference that most of your listeners will have no idea what I was talking about. Sorry. So we did a little research. We found that there was a movie that was done in this style called Lady of the Lake. It starred Robert Montgomery, and he was a detective, you know, like he was Philip Marlowe or something.
Yeah.
And it was all seen through his eyes. The only time you saw him is if he would cross a mirror. And we watched the movie, and we discovered a very interesting thing. He's talking to actors, so it's one-on-one, and there's like a close-up of an actor on the screen looking right at you, looking right into the camera. When the actor talked, it looked fine. When Robert Montgomery talked and the actor was just standing there, reacting and looking, it was very awkward. And the actor clearly felt very, very awkward. So we said, okay, let's design the story so that the injury that the patient has is a throat injury and he can't talk. So we eliminate that problem. So it's all the MASH cast talking, looking into the camera, so they will be less self-conscious. And then we can end the show with him finally saying like 2 words, and that'll have a big impact. So that's how we designed the story. Mm-hmm. And I can't talk about point of view without mentioning the extraordinary job that Charles Dubin, the director, did.
Yeah.
Amazing, especially since this was 1977 and there weren't the mini cams, and there weren't the steady cams, and you didn't have the flexibility of filming that you now have. You had just these big, clunky, giant cameras, and for him to make that work was really extraordinary. So again, I can't talk about the success of Point of View without mentioning Charles Dubin. So we put this thing together, and we're watching it with the editors on a small moviola. It's like a little tiny screen. And then it's finally assembled and put together, and we go into a screening room to watch the final product. This was like a Thursday, and the show is going to air that Monday night. We see the final product with the credits and everything else.
Yeah.
It was horrifying. It was just horrifying. Because on a big screen, it's like there's Radar's head. It's like this giant, huge head. And, we looked at it and we went, oh my God, this is just terrible. And so the show aired. I was, going to have a big party with a whole bunch of people. I canceled this party because this is going to be really embarrassing.
Yeah.
But then when it aired and you saw it on your 19-inch TV or 22-inch TV or 12-inch TV, that was a normal size head. And all of a sudden the show worked.
Yeah,
I was very surprised and relieved.
I can't let you go without talking a little bit about Cheerst and Frasier, because those characters must have been so much fun to write for. Did you have a favorite character?
Well, yes, it was great fun writing those characters, so much so that my partner and I wrote 40 episodes of Cheers and never got tired of those characters. Never thought like, oh my God, how many times are we going to do this? We loved writing them. In terms of the characters themselves, Frazier was always fun because he was kind of an intellectual Daffy Duck. So he was fun to write. The Sam and Diane stuff was fun to write at first. But I'll put it to you this way. There was no character that we did not enjoy writing for.
Yeah.
Loved writing for the coach, and obviously he left us after season 3. And Woody was really fun. All of them, Carla, Lilith, certainly Sam, and Rebecca, Cliff, Norm. They were all fun to write.
I think you mentioned somewhere that the so-called dumb characters like Coach or Woody are perfect to explain the plot to viewers.
Yes, because when Sam is explaining to the coach what is going on, see, Diane and I are each arranging a date for each other, but her date is going to fall through, and this is just her way of trying to date me. So I'm not going to pick anybody myself. So when he's explaining that to the coach, you're explaining it to the audience. So it serves a function in that regard. Also, dumb characters are funny. It's just, a trope of comedy that never grows old, is somebody who says dumb, stupid things, misinterprets things.
You and David wrote one of my favorite episodes of Cheers. It's the episode where Cliff wants to submit a joke to The Tonight Show. Can you tell me how that episode came to be? Like, did you know Carson was going to do it when you wrote it?
Well, yeah, we did, because we came up with the idea and we all laughed in the room. And I had heard that Johnny Carson very rarely, if ever, did any sitcoms. We know that he did a cameo on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but he was in the dark and he had like one line. And so I said, if we don't have Johnny Carson, it's stupid to write the show. And if it means writing a whole episode just to audition for Johnny Carson, especially since he rarely, if ever, will do a sitcom anyway, that seems stupid. That seems like a waste of our time. So let's see if we can get Johnny Carson to commit to it first. So they did, and Carson said yes. It was also his last year, so maybe he was feeling gracious. I don't know, but
that's what I love about the episode. That it takes place like during his last months of the Tonight Show.
Yeah,
and it makes his little interaction with Cliff at the end so bittersweet.
Yeah. Well, what was so much fun is we wrote that episode, and since the premise is that Cliff has been trying to get jokes on the Tonight Show and he's always rejected. And as a goof, Norm intercepts one of his rejection letters and writes an acceptance letter. So Cliff gets that and decides, I want to go to Hollywood. I want to be there the night of my joke. And for Norm, it's like, oh, shit. So they go out to California with Cliff's mom and Norm. And so we had to write a monologue for Johnny Carson with 3 good jokes and then Cliff's bad joke. So that was part of the script, was writing this monologue. And so we select the day that we're going to go down to NBC and tape this. And the plan is they do the Tonight Show, as they always do, from 5:30 to 6:30. Then they would ask the audience, if you wish to stay, we're going to film a couple of scenes from Cheers. And of course, the entire audience stayed. All right. So we show up at about 3:00 in the afternoon, and my partner was out of town. It was just me. And so the first thing I did is I went to Johnny Carson's dressing room and I knocked on the door and I introduced myself and I said, I'm the writer of the episode. is there anything that you would like me to change? Anything that you feel is not in your voice or I could help you with in any way? And Carson said, no, it's great. It's fine. I got it. I memorized it. We're good. I'm like, wow, okay. So for the taping of The Tonight Show, I'm sitting in the green room. And I'm sitting talking for 20 minutes alone with one of his guests, Elizabeth Taylor. Okay, so it's just me and Elizabeth Taylor for 20 minutes. And she was really a lot of fun. She was great. I had a great icebreaker. I said to her, Miss Taylor, my father co-starred in a movie with you. And she goes, oh, really? Who? And I said, well, Cliff Levine. She goes, what? Who's that? And I said, okay, maybe not starring, but in the movie National Velvet, when there's the horse race, my dad is in the crowd. Anyway, so we got along great. So there's 20 minutes of hanging out with Liz Taylor.
Yeah.
So then the Tonight Show finishes taping, and we bring our 4 film cameras out onto the stage. They're positioned out onto the stage. Our director, Jim Burrows, is there. And I'm now standing, if you can picture the Tonight Show, there's the desk, then there's the curtain, and then there's the band.
Yeah.
So I am standing between the curtain and the band, right next to 2 of the cameras. And so they begin the show, and, you hear, it's the Tonight Show. And the band strikes up. It's like right over my ear, I'm hearing da, 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 da. And Johnny Carson walks out like right past me. I mean, I could reach out and touch him if I wanted to. And he stands in front of the audience, and I'm now looking at the cue cards. And the cue cards are our jokes.
That's
amazing. There's Johnny Carson delivering our jokes, and it's getting big laughs from the audience. Like I said, it was just an utterly surreal experience. I have a nice picture of me and Johnny Carson, and I also have a nice picture with me at Johnny's desk interviewing John Ratzenberger.
You also wrote an episode with one of my favorite jokes in Cheers. It's a baby Frederick's first word.
Uh-huh.
That is such a well-crafted and well-set-up joke. Just that recurring thing all over the episode for that payoff.
Well, thank you. I'm very proud of that episode. That's an episode where David and I tried something, we got away with it, and we'll never do it again. The biggest laugh I ever got as a kid from a sitcom was from a show called The Honeymooners, mm-hmm. with Jackie Gleason and Ralph Cramden and Art Carney as Ed Norton. And in this particular episode, Ralph Cramden, who is a bus driver in Brooklyn, goes on a game show called the $99,000 Answer, and he picks as his category popular music. So he's got a week to bone up on popular music. They rent a player piano, and Norton is going to play every tune, and he just becomes an encyclopedia, does Ralph, of popular music. But as kind of a warm-up before each song, Norton, who annoys the crap out of Ralph normally, will go da 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 da, and then play the song. And every time he does it, Gleason is like, "Will you knock that off? It's just driving him crazy." Okay, so he goes on the show, and they go, well, we're going to start with a $5 question, and then it goes up all the way to $99,000. And Ralph is, I'm going to go all the way to the 99,000. I've got this down. Great. Okay. Here's the first song. Da 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 da. The Swanee, he didn't know it. That's the one song he didn't know.
Yeah.
I laughed for 10 minutes. I did not see that coming. I absolutely did not see that coming. And it was such a huge laugh. And I had always wanted to try that. I had always wanted to try a version of a show that built to one huge laugh. And of course, you're really walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get that big laugh, then the entire show is a bomb. So we came up with this idea and we sold it to them, and they all went like, "Yeah, okay, try it. That'd be fun." And as we're writing it, we're going, what are we doing? Why did we decide to do this? Because it meant to set it up, we needed the baby to hear Norm over and over again. And in order to do that, we had to have those Norm entrances. So we set up in the plot of the story that they had put parking meters on the street, and that every hour Norm had to go and feed the meter. So every hour he would come back. But it always meant we had to do a Norm entrance. And Norm entrances were a bitch, especially by season 7 or 8 or whenever this was. And it's hard enough to do one, and we got to do 6. But, and it's the kind of thing too, where until you have an audience and until you get to that point, you have no idea whether it works.
Yeah.
You watch run-throughs and you go, I hope it's funny. I hope it works. And when we shot it that night, it got just a thunderous laugh, just a huge, like a 5-minute laugh. And I turned to David and I said, "Okay, bucket list, check."
If you see it on television, it's such a perfect triple punch, because it's the kid saying Norm, it's the reactions of the cast, and then Lilith going, "He said mommy." It's such a perfect bit.
It was fun. Like I said, it was kind of harrowing, but I think the bottom line here is that David and I, throughout our career, like to challenge ourselves and like to push boundaries and do things that were a little different from time to time.
Yeah, but what struck me about a lot of the episodes you wrote on, you and David, is that they have a lot of heart. Like the Frazier episodes, there are a lot of episodes where Lilith returns and they have these great dialogue about love and divorce. The right amount of drama must be hard to balance in a script for a comedy sitcom.
It is, because the dramatic moments have to be earned.
Yeah.
I've always, I don't know whether you guys get Will and Grace.
Yeah.
So Will and Grace would be 25 minutes of burlesque jokes and then this maudlin moment that like came out of nowhere. And it seemed like it was from a different show. Like I said, I think the characters have to be real. I think you have to really care about their predicament. And I think their predicament has to be something universal that the audience can relate to, can understand sort of what they're going through. And, you know, our shows, I guess it's kind of our upbringing, which stems from the Mary Tyler Moore Show and from MASH, when there was a real humanity to the comedy and to the characters. I see a lot of current comedies that to me are very mean-spirited. And you're getting laughs by watching people humiliate themselves, or you're just getting laughs from people just putting each other down in horrible ways. And the audience, I guess, is finding people's pain really amusing. I don't know, but there doesn't seem to be the amount of humanity that I'm kind of used to. And, you know, we try to inject in all of our shows.
Favorite Cheers episode? Do you have a favorite Cheers episode?
My favorite Cheers episode of the ones that we wrote is called To All the Girls I've Loved Before, and it's Frazier's bachelor party. And one of the reasons why I love that episode so much is that, too, was an experimental episode. We wrote that without any outline at all. The only thing we knew going in was Frazier's going to have a bachelor party, and he's going to second guess whether to get married. And by the end, he'll decide to continue and get married. And other than that, we're just going to have bar talk and see where it went. And so that came out really well. And so I'm really pleased with that one.
Favorite Frasier episode?
Favorite Frasier episode we wrote is called Room Service. And it's the one where Niles sleeps with Lilith.
Yeah, that's a good episode. Do you have any stories about working with or writing for the late, great John Mahoney?
John Mahoney was the sweetest guy. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to direct Frasier as well. And he was so down to earth and such a regular guy, very big into football, huge football fan. You talk to him about football. And just a very sweet, kind of shy man. I remember going to a restaurant, and there he was just sitting by himself, having dinner and, you know, quiet and happy. My John Mahoney story goes back to Cheers. We had written an episode where there is like an old time.
He's the salesman. He plays a salesman in it.
He plays like a Tin Pan Alley songwriter.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, and he's hired to write a jingle for Cheers. Well, another actor had been hired. And that actor was fine, did a really good job all through the week. And then on Tuesday nights, we film the show. And we have a dress rehearsal at 3 p.m. And then at 7 o'clock, we have the show. And this actor had like a panic attack after the dress rehearsal, to the point where he got in his car and drove away and never came back. So that night, that's half the show.
Yeah.
So they only filmed half the show, and they recast it. and they recast it with John Mahoney. And right around that time that the episode aired was when Peter Casey, David Lee, and David Angel were casting Frazier and looking for someone to play the father. And they saw John Mahoney on that episode, and they said, you know what, he'd be great. So you wonder if that other actor played the part instead. Maybe John Mahoney might not be on their radar, that maybe John Mahoney would not have gotten that job. For all I know, the actor who split might have gotten the job. But you talk about an interesting turn of events.
What is your opinion on revival shows like the Frasier revival they just announced?
Well, I wish them well. I love those characters. I don't know what they're going to do with them. I don't know who's going to write it. The two gentlemen who are creating this new version are not writers from Frasier in the past. And I don't know whether they plan to bring in any Frasier writers. So I don't know, but I wish them the best. I want sophisticated multi-camera shows to come back again.
My one last thing, and it's my favorite Ken Levine fact. You coined the name the Isotopes for the baseball team on The Simpsons.
Yes.
That has to be a great honor.
That's my legacy. I got to throw out the first pitch once too.
For the Isotopes, the real Isotopes.
Yeah, we wrote an episode of The Simpsons early on called Dancing Homer, where Homer becomes a mascot at the local team. It kind of stems from my baseball background too, because I was a baseball announcer. I spent 3 years in the minors and then 12 years announcing Major League Baseball. And so we had to do the show, and it was set in Springfield, which is where the Simpsons are. And usually for minor league teams to come up with a team name, they usually pick something associated with whatever the big factory or manufacturing product is in that city. And of course, there's the nuclear reactor. So we came up with Isotopes because of atomic particles that seem to be the one that's the most fun. And so then a few years later, Albuquerque gets a AAA team, and they decide to name it the Isotopes. And so I start getting calls from television stations and radio stations in Albuquerque, New Mexico, saying, how did I come up with Isotopes? And I said, you're really not going to like this answer. I said, we did it as a joke. We never thought a team would actually do that. But they did. And like I said, I got invited to go. You can't see it, but I'm holding up my Isotopes hat. And there's like statues of Homer Simpson in the ballpark. And I went down and met some of the players. And one of the players was sort of mad at me and goes, oh, so you're the guy that came up with the stupid name that embarrasses me every time I have to walk out onto the field wearing this stupid Isotopes uniform. And I said, you know what? Then get better and make the major leagues. Okay? Let this be an incentive to you to make the major leagues. And if you do, you have me to thank.
Well, Ken, thank you so much. This was so much fun talking to you, listening to you. I'm a big fan of your blog and your podcast. I've been following it for about 4 or 5 years, if that's possible.
No, thank you.
Where can people find that blog and that podcast?
The podcast is called Hollywood and Levine, and you can find it on iTunes, on Apple. It's on Spotify. It's on Pandora. It's on iHeartRadio. It's on most podcast apps. And it's about a half hour a week. And I tell war stories like this, or give advice, or interview people like Perry Gilpin of Frazier, and Jamie Farr of MASH, and Jim Burrows of Cheers, and various other people in the industry. And I also have a blog which I've been doing for 16 years now.
I love your blog. I'm a big fan.
No, thank you. It's called By Ken Levine. So just go to bykenlevine.com, or just go to Google and go Ken Levine blog, and it'll take you there.
Perfect. Again, thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
And I hope this pandemic blows over soon so I can visit the real Hollywood and Levine.
I know. I hope I can actually come and visit you someday.
Dit was Ben je nog aan het kijken voor dit seizoen. Het zal geen verrassing zijn dat ik al bezig ben aan een tweede seizoen van deze podcast, met hopelijk weer een hele diversiteit aan gasten en interviews over onze goede vriend televisie. In de tussentijd kunnen jullie zich alvast herabonneren op Mosselen om 1:30, want die gaat ook weer van start eind mei. En ik wil nog vlug bedanken de mensen die deze podcast mee mogelijk maken. Wim de Dobbeleer voor mijn prachtig artwork, Jimmy de Wit aka DJ Bobby Ewing voor die oorworm intro en Jens Pioneers voor het afmixen van de podcast, zodat dit toch beter klinkt dan de Zoom-gesprekken die ze zijn. En ik dank jullie oprecht voor het luisteren. Aarzel niet om iets te droppen op Facebook, Instagram of Twitter als je genoten hebt en de show wilt delen met uw volgers. Ik was Xander de Rijke. Jullie horen mij volgend seizoen weer terug en dan bingen we weer iets anders in Ben je nog aan het kijken?
Ben je nog aan het kijken?
Met Xander de Rijke.